this particular panel is coming out, and you see our wonderful panelists here. This panel is coming out of the work carried out in the sound production kind of focus course, which is called Sound and Motion Methods. And for this particular iteration, which was last semester, we've focused on sonic storytelling, or how to use sound to tell creative stories. So I'll tell you a little bit about the course, and then I'll introduce our presenters today, who will be showcasing parts of their podcast episodes that they made, or sound stories that they made throughout this course. So we approach sonic storytelling both as a skill, but also as an experience in this course, as a means to comprehend the world around us. So the primary goal of the course was to produce a feature, which is what we're showcasing today, but also learn production skills while doing it, while advancing our understanding of sound as a phenomena, right? Sound as a phenomena in the world, and how it interacts with the ways we tell stories, how we listen and perceive the world, how we experience and understand our bodies through sound, and also how knowledge is generated and circulated using and through sound, right? So that was kind of the idea of the course. We engaged with the works of sound producers, ethnomusicologists, podcasters, documentarians, and musicians to engage with sound as a broad phenomenon. So you have some context to know why people are suddenly talking about sound or recording it or using that as a medium, right? So our presenters today are Jack. Our presenter is Jack Newton, who is a DCD major and a film and TV production minor. He's also a sports camera person and has worked with ESPN and the Chanticleer Sports Network and has covered plenty of coastal sports games. Our second presenter is Corinne Barrett. Corinne,
hi.
Who is also DCD major and a graphic design minor. And Corinne's also worked with me on producing a short visual poem film, which was featured yesterday at a similar panel. Our third presenter is Sub Matthias, who's a DCD major and a GIS minor, and also an honor student. Sub is also currently a student fellow at the Center for Collaborative Research. And our fourth and final presenter is Emily Webb, who's a DCD major with a graphic design and a social media minor, so 2 minors, wow. And she's also the social media intern for the Department of English and the DCD program currently. So as you can see, we're in some august company. They're all very accomplished majors with plenty minors and lots of cool opportunities in campus work. All right, so we will now play the intro episode of this, what we're calling a limited podcast series titled Old Media and New Worlds. And followed by that would be individual podcast episodes. Parts of it, the students will introduce them and they will play a part of it, and they'll talk to you a little bit about how they made it, what their motivations were on picking certain themes, and so on and so forth. Right? Correct.
The shift from physical storage to streaming-based platforms has completely altered the ways that we interact with music in the modern age.
The idea that something as simple as a VHS tape or a Polaroid photo can hold more sentimental value than anything we store in the digital cloud.
Have you ever thought about how entertainment is changing and how it's affecting us?
Fast forward to today, and gaming has exploded into a multi-billion-dollar industry, streamed, downloaded, and shared globally.
For centuries, people all over the world have had to adapt their ways of communicating during times of oppression, censorship, and surveillance. People kept talking when they weren't allowed to be heard.
Now think about TikTok today. Some videos show the trad wife trend. This is short for traditional wife. These videos often show women cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the home.
In the age of artificial intelligence and two-day deliveries, older forms of interaction and communication seem to be disappearing. And yet, they somehow continue to shape and form our reality. Old Media in New Worlds is a podcast series created during the Sonic Storytelling course in the Digital Culture and Design program at Coastal Carolina University. We research and narrate stories about our personal and social relationships with somewhat archaic and yet ever-present media. We talk about CDs, photo albums, vinyl records, radio sets, arcade games, children's entertainment, and older television shows. Across 6 different episodes, we will discuss how new media forms are shaped by legacies and cultures of the past. We focus on recurring trends, technological developments, economic and industrial shifts, and uncanny similarities between the past and present. We explore intersections of old and new forms from different vantage points, going through histories, experiences, memories, and analysis. We offer new perspectives on our increasingly entangled modern life surrounded by emerging media industries and our interventions to keep reimagining what it means to be human.
And it's the intro, and I invite Jack to share.
So I'm going to share a little snippet of my podcast that was a little around 10 minutes long, but I focus my podcast specifically on like a timeline of video games and video game consoles, and more specifically about the communities they create. My whole life I've been playing video games and been in these communities, whether it's online or in person. And, whether it's sports or video games or whatever, I just like the communities that they create and the sort of experiences you can have through media like this. So my podcast talks about how the current media landscape, whether it's digital or physical, has been modified for profit over experience in the last few decades. And I focus on why nostalgia is able to keep certain games and certain consoles alive, even though they aren't made anymore. And the main point of doing a podcast of this type is to use sounds, not just words, not just speaking, not just narrative. Use different sounds to tell a story. So that's what I tried to do here with my episode. Fast forward to today, and gaming has exploded into a multi-billion-dollar industry, streamed, downloaded, and shared globally. But to understand how we got here, we need to look back to the consoles, cartridges, and communities that built modern gaming from the ground up. The early days of gaming were deeply physical. You didn't just play a game, you owned it. You held it, blew dust from its cartridge, and proudly stacked boxes beside your television. The first home console, the Magnavox Odyssey, released in 1972. It was a clunky plastic box with simple white graphics and plastic overlays that stuck to your TV screen. According to the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, it came with cards, dice, and even fake money, an odd mix of board game and digital play.
Magnavox presents Odyssey, the electronic game of the future. Odyssey easily attaches to any brand TV, black and white or color, to create a closed-circuit electronic playground. Odyssey gives you all the exciting action of hockey and 11 other challenging play and learning games for the entire family.
As outlined in many different historical console and video game timelines, consoles evolved quickly. Atari brought arcades home, Nintendo brought families together, and Sega turned gaming into competition. The sound of a cartridge clicking into place was a ritual, a moment of connection. Arcades, too, defined social gaming. They were public spaces of competition and community, before online lobbies ever existed. From Pac-Man to Street Fighter 2, gaming was tactile, it was local, and it was deeply social. Ownership wasn't just about having a cartridge. It was about belonging to a community. At some point, everything shifted. As technology advanced, gaming began shedding its physical skin. Discs replaced cartridges,
and later, downloads replaced discs. With platforms like Xbox Live and PlayStation Network, play became much less about possession and much more about access. Game servers replaced living rooms. Digital storefronts replaced shelves. Increasingly, players realized, you don't own the game. You are just renting access. Companies like 2K Interactive and EA Sports have made this explicit with titles that deactivate online features after just a few years. Meanwhile, the transition from 2D to 3D redefined immersion. This wasn't just a technological leap, it was a conceptual one.
We'll pause there.
Yeah, so
Yeah, continue.
yeah, it fascinates me the way that with all this evolution that people still like to go back and play these older video games and use these older consoles, and it's because of the memories they create, the communities they create, the family experience, all of that, and it's still relevant today. And throughout this class, we learned a lot about ways of listening. Specifically, it helped me a lot to listen to professional podcasts and learn the ways that they fade in and out of different sounds and different transitions and stuff. So it was really nice for me. In my place of work, I produce live sports games, and producing a podcast was a totally different experience. So it was nice to kind of combine the two and tell a story. We used different methods to get these sounds. We looked at different sound repositories where we could find different background noises, which is some of the gaming audio I use. But we also did specific sound recording where we went out and recorded sounds ourselves with different devices. So it taught me a couple different methods to create a narrative like this. And then the last step was obviously editing in Adobe Audition. And this is probably my third time using Audition, but it was a really good experience to learn different ins and outs of that platform, being able to edit audio while I'm used to doing more video style production. So it was really nice to do this assignment, and it taught me something that I didn't know I liked so much.
Thank you, Jack. Next is Corinne.
So my podcast, you'll hear it in the clip that I play, but it's basically about censorship in in the past and how we see that play out today as well, and also how people have subverted it, like avoided or gotten around censorship to continue communicating. And then again, like those patterns that we see in more modern days. And it, like, the whole first introduction says basically that. So if you want to play that.
Okay, then stop from the start.
Yeah, that's fine.
Old Media in New Worlds. Episode 1. Communication Under Watch. Have you ever felt like you were being watched, listened to? Maybe you have felt the presence of a sibling listening in on your phone call from the other room, or that your phone has listened to your conversations. Maybe you even just worry that the things you post on social media might be taken down due to the topic, or simply your word choice. In these moments, what do you do differently? Do you change the tone of your voice or the topic altogether? Do you use code words or just start to whisper? Do you speak a different language or simply write the message down rather than saying it out loud? For centuries, people all over the world have had to adapt their ways of communicating during times of oppression, censorship, and surveillance. In this episode, you will learn about some of the ways that people kept talking when they weren't allowed to be heard. During the Soviet Union's rule in the 20th century, censorship wasn't just a policy, it was the backbone of the regime. The state controlled every channel of information, allowing only the ideas that fit its ideology. Suddenly, the public had no access to unbiased news, independent literature, forbidden ideas, or even the music they once loved. Books were mass removed from libraries and homes, burned or destroyed if they didn't align with the ideologies of the regime. With that came revolt. But instead of sparking loud protests, this sparked something quieter and far more resilient. It became an underground act of resistance known as samizdat. The word in Russian comes from sam, meaning self, and izdat, meaning publishing. The concept first appeared in the 1940s when poet Nikolai Glaskov jokingly labeled his self-typed poems Sam sebya izdat, published by myself. With the state controlling all official presses, ordinary citizens took publishing into their own hands. They typed banned text on carbon paper, passed along copies, and even hand-wrote entire manuscripts. Through samizdat, people circulated forbidden novels, poetry, religious writings, memoirs, and most dangerous of all, political dissent. Underground magazines and newsletters formed a shadow press reporting on real events the state refused to acknowledge. And samizdat didn't stop with the written word. Magnetizdat emerged as homemade tape copying networks for banned music, while tamizdat involved smuggling works published abroad back into the USSR. Together, these quiet acts of copying and sharing formed a cultural lifeline, one built by citizens who refused to let their stories, ideas, and voices disappear.
So that was just one kind of historical anecdote that I found through my research while making this podcast. Basically the self-publishing, the pattern of self-publishing that we see not just in Soviet Union, Russia, but in different points of time all over the world. I later go on in the episode to talk about how we see that during, I think it was the 1800s, with anti-slavery pamphlets. And we see that now more modernly with zines. If you guys have heard of those, they're little handmade books that are fun to make. And yeah, so there's just, I lost my train of thought. But during this process, I also got to interview Lauren Mixon, who is kind of an expert here at Coastal on zines, and that was my first kind of interview that I've ever conducted myself, where I came up with the questions and then went to a recording studio and did that. So that was a really cool experience to be able to do that. And then also, like Jack said, learning to use Adobe Audition I had some practice before that, but it was I definitely learned a lot more, and I would say that it's now a skill I can probably put on my resume, I hope. But yeah, it was fun. It was a blast.
So, thank you, Corinne. They're being modest. They're really good at audition, and they produced this wonderful episode. So, all right, the next presenter is Sue Matthias, and the episode's about online streaming.
Yeah, that's me. I did my episode about online music streaming, and I contrasted it with the physical medium of CDs. I was inspired by, about probably over a year ago now, I started picking up my own CDs and collecting them. And I realized throughout the process of it, I stopped listening to streaming very often. I was mostly listening to CDs. It, completely changed the way that I related to my music, the way that I listened to it, and even the way that I was able to talk to my friends about music. It became, much more in-depth and interactive. I just felt more connected to the music I was listening to through listening to it with this physical medium as opposed to streaming. And I wanted to explore that a little bit further with my own podcast episode. So that was my inspiration.
So, do you have a time?
Just the first, 2.5 minutes. This year, I broke up with Spotify. Breaking up with Spotify isn't necessarily an uncommon phenomenon. Plenty of people are doing it today, and each person has their own reason. be that the reliance on AI, how little artists are compensated, prevalence of advertisements, or just generally the recommendation algorithm. While I understand and even agree with a lot of these sentiments, none of it was the main reason why Spotify and I split. How do you listen to music? And I don't mean your music taste, if you like punk or jazz or whatever. I mean physically. Do you use headphones, earbuds? Do you play it out loud? Do you listen on the bus, in the car, or on the way to work? How is it that you interact with the music around you? When I was a kid, my sister and I almost exclusively listened to CDs on our Hello Kitty radio. Playing a disc was an event for us. We'd gather together in her room, briefly argue over what to play, and then dance our little hearts out until we had listened to the whole thing. It's a great memory, and to be honest, I still stand by those CDs. Kids Bop 19 will always and forever be one of my favorite discs. The most popular way to listen to music today is through digital music streaming platforms. These services are essentially libraries that you pay to have access to, or tolerate advertisements in between songs.
Want a break from the ads?
The best part? It's all packed right into your smartphone. We're talking Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, and more. A report by data company Illuminate states that in 2023, there were around 184 million audio tracks across all major streaming platforms, with about 120,000 being added every day. Could you listen to 120,000 songs in a day, a week? How about a year? Let's do some math. According to Digital Music News, the average length of a song in 2019 was 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, let's be generous and say that every song is about 3 minutes long. 120,000 songs at 3 minutes average is over 8 full months of non-stop listening. And that's being added in just one day. The full 184 million songs, over 1,000 years. This is an unfathomable amount of music. So much of it goes unheard. On Spotify alone, there were 45.6 million tracks with 0 streams in 2023. So what does get heard? And who gets to decide?
Yeah, it was a really fun experience getting to explore this interest a little bit deeper and to get to talk about it. The most interesting part for me was figuring out how to record the sounds. So I have a couple of different CD players. I have one in my car, I had a boombox, I have a Walkman. So I was able to go and experiment, figure out what kind of circumstances and environments would get me the best sound recordings. I also was pretty intentional with the music and the background tracking sound I used. I wanted to try and incorporate some of the music from my CDs. So I was able to rip some of the music off of my CDs and incorporate that into my own project, which I found really nice. It was a lot of fun. It was an interesting topic to explore, and I hope that it interests a lot more people. I know that physical media, and especially CDs and vinyl, is kind of making a resurgence nowadays, so I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about it.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. All right, last but not least, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. For my podcast, I was looking at how old and new media shapes gender roles, specifically in the workplace. So I'm playing the beginning clip of my podcast. So I used examples from Mad Men, I Love Lucy, and a 1950s ad. And I kind of connected them to modern trends that we see today on social media. One being the trad wife trend, which I'll get more into. But yeah, just how even though these platforms have changed, we still see the same patterns in today's society.
Start about?
Have you ever watched Mad Men? There's this scene where Peggy Olson enters a room filled with men in suits. She's holding a notepad and trying to share her ideas while everyone talks over her. That moment shows how women were often treated at work in the past. Now think about TikTok today. Some videos show the trad wife trend. This is short for traditional wife. These videos often show women cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the home. Some people say it is about bringing back old values, but it also repeats old ideas about women's roles. Hi everyone, my name is Emily Webb. Today we are talking about both old and new media influences gender roles in the workplace. Even though many years have passed since the show like I Love Lucy, we still see similar patterns today.
An ordinary dinner party, the sort of occasion we all enjoy. The men are exchanging witty stories. And look at the women, aren't they pretty? Look at the way they laugh. They're delightful.
I think the government should stay off the gold standard so that the pound can reach a level that will keep our exports competitive.
The lady has foolishly attempted to join the conversation with a wild and dangerous opinion of her own. Daphne, we're going home. Women, know your limits.
If you look at old TV shows, it is easy to see gender roles. In I Love Lucy, Lucy dreams about being on stage, but her husband tells her to stay home. In the Dick Van Dyke Show, the woman is a housewife who supports her husband. In Mad Men, which takes place in the 1960s, women are secretaries and men are the bosses. The women make coffee and take notes, while the men make decisions. Old ads also share these same ideas. There's this one ad from the 1950s that shows a woman opening a bottle. Quote, "You mean a woman can open it? Easily, without a knife blade, a bottle opener, or even a husband," unquote. It was supposed to be a fun or clever advertisement, but it sent a message that women were incapable of simple tasks, weak, or dependent on men, reinforcing harmful stereotypes common at the time. Media researcher Julia T. Wood writes that women were often shown as caring and emotional, while men were shown as strong and independent. Because TV and magazines were a big part of life, these ideas spread quickly. When girls saw women cooking and cleaning on screen, they learned what was expected of them.
That was like a little snippet of my podcast. This was like a super fun experience. I'm a very visual learner, so having to completely eliminate all my Canva resources was super challenging, but I really enjoyed using Audition and being able to go out and record sounds, being able just to use what's in my own house, off campus, my vacuum, the sink, fountain. That was really cool to being able to do. I really enjoyed this experience of just being able to choose my own topic, but in the grand scheme of everyone's topics, and just being able to show how even though technology has changed, gender stereotypes about women's roles still exist, and just bringing that up, and just how media plays a big role into shaping women's lives just from what we see on TV and entertainment. And yeah, thank you.
I can't believe. All right, so those were snippets from the podcast series, and that's our album cover. We're going to transport all of these podcasts into a SoundCloud sort of feature, and it'll be available for online listening. We're still working through some iterative editing, so if you have feedback on things which could improve, we want to take that from you, and then we want to work on those before we finally upload that, and we'll share. You'll have the QR codes available through the DCD and Wish accounts for you to re-listen and listen to all these episodes later on. But we can give another round of applause for all these podcasts. Wonderful girls from my students. So now is the time for Q&A, and we have about 18 minutes, which is, I think, plenty of time. to ask all the questions that you've been meaning to ask all this while you've been listening to our presenters.
I have a question. What made you guys inspired to make make your podcast about
Right.
I know that you made yours about sports, made yours about music, and how what drove you to go music or sports or the traditional senses that are bringing back into the world?
So mine was about video games, but I chose to do mine about video games because literally as long as I can remember, I've been watching people play video games online and playing them with my friends and stuff. And I've just been, again, the community aspect of it was the main reason for me. The way it can bring people together. This is why I love it so much.
For me, I think I've also been taking a lot of women gender study classes, and we do talk a lot about stereotypes just in society. So I think that kind of sparked the idea of it and kind of just kept the ball rolling into the next.
I was just thinking very literally about media and old media versus new media, and I hit a wall. I didn't know what to do it about, and so I don't know. We kind of brainstormed out loud and somehow landed on censorship and how it's it happened in the past and how we see it today and how people avoid it. So.
Yeah, and if you listen to Corinne's later part of the episode, it has a lot of how do people avoid censorship in current social media, or instead of saying kill or die, they will say unalive. Mm-hmm. Or so he's also talking about strategies that seem to have carried over across time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm gonna kind of said already, but I was kind of inspired by my own interest in collecting CDs. But also more generally in music. Music is something that I feel can connect all of us. It's something that I talk a lot about, with my sisters and with my friends, about how we feel even if we don't know how to fully express ourselves with our words, we can point to a song and be I've felt this before, I know how this feels, and sort of a reflection of that. And I was also really interested in algorithms. I talked a little bit in my episode about the way that Spotify recommends you music versus how you pick something out for yourself or take recommendations from your friend when you have physical media. So I was really interested in algorithms and how they shape what we consume and our lives and stuff like that. So that's my inspiration.
Other questions, thoughts, feedback?
I have a question, and I'll give you two because my first question, I'm not good at answering questions like this, so I'll give you another question. But so it's if you can think about your ideal career when you leave here, and something, an element from this class that you could apply, or a skill you learned from this class that you can apply to that that ideal career. So that's question one. And if you can't think of that, then what was the hardest thing about this? Most difficult, challenging part.
I'll answer first. So, my dream job right now would be to work in sports media in some way. It doesn't matter if it's journalism or broadcast I do now. I just want to be a part of it. And learning these editing skills and how to take different sources and combine them into a comprehensive narrative, along with just the editing skills, the technical skills, I think I can create more media that is impactful. And this is specifically in audio form, but the sound editing goes with any visual, I've done video essay type stuff before. And so if I was doing something for sports and it was doing short graphics or short hype videos, whatever, stuff like that, I just think the understanding the editing part was a big point for this assignment.
For me, I am waiting to hear back from some grad schools. I just applied for Master of Arts in Teaching for technology education. So I'm really excited about that. Fingers crossed. But I guess I could maybe see teaching students how to make a podcast would be super fun. But what was super challenging was honestly just using Audition. Basically taking all your visuals out and only doing audio was a whole brain workaround. You're having to instead of training your eyes, you have to train your ears a different way. So learning how to do that was like super challenging.
I'm gonna answer the second question because who knows what's happening next? Not me. Same kind of thing that Emily said is the scripting for me was the hardest part, because even though like words are visual, I like the whole audio, like I'm not seeing like pieces of a puzzle fit together. And so like that made it hard. Like what am I trying to say? What she said, basically. Yeah. The difference between like a visual form of media, like a visual output versus an audio output, there are a lot of differences in that, and it made it difficult.
Both of you guys are graphic designers.
Yeah. Because I think with digital creators, like we're very like eye trained with like, oh, we know what colors work well together. We know how to visually see if this font is too big or whatever. But like having to train your ears, being like, oh, are the levels correct? Yeah. Is there like a noise that's happening that's not supposed to be happening? But then when we'll show it to Dr. Epen and he's like, oh, well, there's this, and this. And we're like, oh my gosh, we didn't even feel that. Yeah.
A lot of nitpicking was involved. Scoop, and then we can get Professor Brandt's question.
Yeah, I mean, as far as future careers, I've been really looking into like historical archiving right now. I really like digitizing stuff into making like historical artifacts and making them accessible online for people. So having this sort of like, I can picture using like the skills of recording and editing as a form of like potentially interviewing people about their own like historical experiences. I know I'm doing like a research project right now about like Conway and movie theaters, and I'm planning to interview a bunch of people about their experiences growing up like in the 60s and how it was experiencing movie theaters then. So having those sort of base skills of doing the audio recording, the editing, and just like digitizing sort of like this physical thing into making it accessible online, I think those skills will be really useful.
Thank you. That's
It was less a question and more just a continuation of that thought about the difference between visual and audio storytelling. And like with the sound or narration for picture, and it's so easy to just tell the story tangential to what's being shown. Like so much is explained in the visual that you don't then have. Like you have to try to either find a sound that's going to help tell that story, or you have to make it explicit in your script of what it is that you're talking about. It's just a very, very different way of approaching the problem that you were hinting at.
Yeah. Going off of that also is finding like the sound effects, or trying to even just come up with sound effects that would like paint the picture that I'm speaking was very difficult, because it's like in mine I know that there's some leveling issues and some things need to be turned up a bit, but there were like sounds of typewriters or writing or like whispering, and coming up with enough. I don't remember what the like assignment required, but it was like 20 different sounds that we recorded ourselves, and I was like, I can't even come up with 5. So that was definitely something that I had trouble with. Yeah.
And then they also have to be clear.
Yeah, exactly.
To the listener who might not know what.
Yeah, what it is, because scribbling might sound like this, or yeah.
Other questions, students? Anything that you thought of while you were listening to these? Yeah.
I'm just curious, while you were creating these, did you ever have a moment where maybe you added a sound effect that changed the meaning of what gave your meaning to the track?
Great question.
That you didn't expect.
I'll answer. So, there's some points where I have background music. There's some points where I don't, and then there's a point where there's like an ambient arcade sound behind it. But just like going through different background sounds, it was so hard to find the right one to like fit like my tone, my cadence. It was tough to keep it all comprehensive and not have a sound that feels out of place, especially for a background sound. But yeah, it was definitely tough to find specific sounds that matched what you're saying, for sure.
Do you have a question at the back? No. Well, you can say nice things also. You don't need to have a question. Say, I really want it.
Well, I was just going to say, they're all super smart projects.
I didn't see you there.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, like, to hear you all choose something, you know, like, of the past to bring it to the forward moment. I think my, like, immediate thing that I go to with, like, okay, what would I do, like, if I was in this situation? I think I immediately go into, I hate my voice recorded. So I guess my comment or, like, question to you all, did you think about, like I listen to, like, a voicemail or, like, listening to myself, like, a recorded lecture, for instance, and I'm like, oh my God, like, I sound like that. So, like, I wondered, like, did you have an experience? Did you learn, you know, when you're reading a narrative, you can't say or likes, or, like, was there a lot of, like, you talked like a little bit about that, but, like, I'm just curious of, like, how you feel about your voice, your, like, physical voice.
Nice question,
I will say that when I recorded my intro, like the first minute and a half maybe, I was getting over a cold, and so when I listened to it back, not only was like I speaking in a lower tone, like that was not very easy to hear, but I also didn't sound like myself, and so it just like threw me for a loop. I was like, what? Who is that? And then I recorded the next part like a couple weeks later. And after like realizing that I probably should have re-recorded the first part, I made those adjustments in the rest of the podcast. It definitely was weird listening to myself for like my episode. I think is 12 minutes, and which is the longest. But for listening to myself talk for 12 minutes straight was definitely a weird experience, funny experience.
Yeah, going off of that, I think when we were presenting like our rough drafts to like each other in class, like we all gave each other like some notes, whatever, and like one for me was like I talk way too fast, so having to like retrain myself to like not like talk so fast, because once in audition, if you like edit your voice at all, it's just gonna sound like a robot. So like having to re-record multiple times, being like, oh, like, okay, I have to enunciate that more, or I have to like slow down, like take a deep breath, like pauses are okay. It's not like a bad thing. So just having to like being able to like retrain how I speak, because I'm a very like fast talker.
I also think about like the podcasts that I enjoy listening to. I don't think I would listen to it if I didn't like their voice. Like there's like yoga sessions that I do as well, and I will not do the session, like a recorded session of yoga, if their voice is like super high pitch or like calming. So it's like, it's an interesting idea of like, you know, maybe not everybody has a podcast voice.
Yeah. Jack has the best podcast. Yeah.
I might have just had the best mic.
It could also just be the confidence of it. Yeah.
I had a similar thing with Emily where I tend to talk fast, and so I had to go back and re-record a couple of things, like a bunch of it, because I would just talk too fast, or again with like trying to enunciate my words. I have a little bit of experience with that, because I mean, like at my job I have to like announce over the loudspeakers sometimes, so I try and like be very conscious about my enunciation of words, making sure I'm speaking clearly, but sometimes I do stumble over my words, so I have to really listen out for those as I was editing, being like, am I speaking clearly? Am I too fast? Can I be understood? That was my main thing.
I think also you mentioned like filler words and stuff and having to change like the way you talk. For me, that was a little easier because I was reading straight from the script that I wrote. Like I fully prepared word for word everything I was gonna say, and that made it a lot easier for me not to use any filler words, which I do all the time usually. And also I tend to lose my track of thought. What you see? Yeah. So, and I also lost my train of thought. But having a script made that a lot easier not to do.
We could do one last question. Anything like burning in your chest with like, oh, want to ask this before I leave? Will not sleep well tonight otherwise. Anything? Yes.
If you have a question, go ahead.
Yes, and then we can do the comments.
It from like start like the assignment itself, it probably took like a month, but like we did kind of split it up. So like 1 week we recorded our own audios. The next week we searched for audios. The next week we recorded our voice. So it's kind of split up. But in terms of like, once I had everything and I sat down in audition, it was probably like 3 to 4 hours of me actually like editing it. But other than that, we kind of spaced it out over time.
It was like a semester long thing. Like each week we would learn a different, like how to use the recorders or write the script draft and then get like edits for it. So like each week we kind of like slowly built to like getting the finished product.
And do readings and do research. Like reverse scripting, listen to other podcasts. There's like a bunch of stuff to talk. And talk about like conceptual stuff around sound, noise, listening as ideas that are regionally or specific to like people or communities. So all of that was also involved.